It's that time again. The annual conference of the American Society of Ag Consultants, otherwise known as ASAC, is going to be held in Fort Myers, Florida, this November 4th and 5th. Kurt Covington is one of 9 professionals who will address the conference. The other speakers who will cover a wide range of topics represent Florida Farm Bureau, Florida Citrus Commission, University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture, National Ag Law Center, Risk Mitigators and Advisors, Tyler Associates, as well as the lead economist for dairy at CoBank, and myself, Chrissy Wozniak from North American Ag. The day and a half of presentations will be followed by ag tours on Tuesday afternoon at Echo Farms, one of my favorite places here in Fort Myers. Attendees will experience farming at its most creative, with unique demonstrations, plants, and techniques being used to help farmers and urban gardeners in developing countries. A second tour at Echo will showcase simple technologies that can improve food, water, and shelter for millions of people. A third tour of a hydroponic grower is also being planned. For more information and to register, visit www.agconsultants.org. That's www.agconsultants.org. See you there. Our sponsor today is GAPS. GAPS brings water remediation and soil amendments to the agricultural businesses of Ontario, Canada. Phosphorus runoff is a big deal. This company coordinates and facilitates grant-based projects that are built to test new phosphorus removal products on an ongoing basis. GAPS provides these successful R&D products in their toolbox of solutions and are sold to the producer, golf course, and municipalities. Their goal is to help build better soil and to manage water without the use of chemicals. Visit GAPS at gapsontario.com or visit their link in the show notes. Hi, and welcome to the North American Ag Spotlight. I'm Chrissy Wozniak. My guest today is Director of Government Affairs and Market Regulatory Policy for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. He has been on Ag Spotlight before, but today we're going to be talking about the NCBA's stance on the Cattle Contract Library Bill and their ongoing push for transparency in the industry. I'd like to welcome back Tanner Beymer. Thank you so much, Tanner, for being here.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
Awesome. So first of all, can you explain to me what the Cattle Contract Library Bill is?
Yes. So this is a piece of legislation that we've been working on for a while now as part of our efforts on market transparency. And what the bill would do is it would tee up and authorize USDA to maintain a catalog of all the different types of contracts that are offered by packers to cattle producers for the purchase of fed cattle. The reason that's so important is because as we've looked at market transparency, the formula bucket is kind of what we've been looking at, not exclusively, but certainly with keen interest over the past several months. Formulas are, of course, an interesting and unique categorization of transactions because unlike the other 3 defined transaction types at USDA, contract, negotiated grid, negotiated cash, formulas are more so defined by what they aren't than by what they are. It's a catch-all bucket for those transactions that don't meet the definition of the other 3. So the terms vary widely, and then even geographically, the qualities and the traits in cattle that are being incentivized with formulas are different. And so this is just one more arrow in the quiver for producers. You know, information is power, right? And more information when you're going into a negotiating situation for pricing mechanisms or whatever the case may be. This gives them more information to go into that with, and they can compare their marketing arrangements with those of other cattle producers and maybe find some opportunities to capture some more leverage with packers.
Right. That's awesome. So can you tell me about the current relationship right now between meat packers and producers?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, packers, of course, are the buyer of the finished product. If you're a cow-calf producer, a stocker backgrounder, or a cattle feeder, and you're in the business of raising steers and heifers for fed slaughter, the packer is your ultimate end consumer, of course, for the live animal. And so there's a variety of different ways that packers procure cattle. Of course, there's negotiated cash, which is the most traditional and a major contributor to price discovery, which which has also been an issue that NCBA has been working on for a long time. But over the last several years, we've seen an increase in the use of formula transactions to market fed cattle. So this particular piece of legislation is really designed to shed more light into that formula bucket, right? And to inform producers about what the different types of transactions that there are available in there. I think the type of formula that producers are most familiar with is some sort of a base price plus or minus premiums and discounts. And that is certainly a formula. It's probably the one that's most frequently used, but other types of transactions, it's like we call them top of markets, which is basically just you get a flat price, which is the top of the cash market weighted averages from the previous week, or cash plus transactions, maybe utilizing some sort of a formula that incorporates the futures market. This legislation is really designed to shed some more light into that formula bucket.
Right. That's good. And so the producers need more leverage, right? So you're saying that this will give them more leverage in a lot of different ways, specifically in these the different ways that the buyers would be looking at the transaction, right?
Well, I think it provides an opportunity for producers to capture more leverage, right? Because if I'm a producer and I go into a contract library and I find out that, there are packers out there, I might not know necessarily where they're at, but they exist out there and they're willing to pay a premium for, say, non-hormone treated cattle. And I've got a pen of NHTC steers in my feed yard. I now know that when I'm negotiating with the packer, whether it's on the negotiated market or whether it's in a formula type of a system, I can go and I can make that request for a premium price for that particular product. And that's just one example, right? We can do this with quality grades. We can do this with forecasted dressing percentages. We can do this with yield grades, all different types of quality, breed associations, what have you. And so I say it presents the opportunity for more leverage because it allows those producers, again, to compare their marketing arrangements to other producers, maybe in their region. And then having that information can go better informed into some of these pricing negotiations with meatpackers.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point. And so there's a few parts to my next question. Is this real-time data? How often is it updated? And is it looking ahead or behind?
So it is looking behind. It would require at the very first. So if this passes both the House and the Senate, gets the president's signature, it's enacted law. Then USDA would be required to collect this information from packers about all the existing contracts that they offer out to producers. And that would be subject to USDA's confidentiality rules. It would be collected in a very similar manner to all the data that's currently being received by packers under Livestock Mandatory Reporting. So that means that the information would have to be aggregated together, reported out in weighted average more likely than not, and then subjected to USDA's rules of confidentiality. But then going forward, it would need to be regularly maintained. So as more contracts are negotiated or contracts that have been negotiated become inactive, that's reflected by USDA, probably not in real time. I think the bill text says that it needs to be updated both on a weekly and a monthly basis, and different reports are associated with each update. But it would need to be maintained so that it is current. And the other thing that's interesting about this is that this would become a very useful transparency tool at the very beginning. But over time, it will increase in transparency value because, again, all those contracts that are no longer being offered would get marked as inactive. So as we start to move through time, you can start to detect seasonal trends, and you can start to detect maybe regional trends as well, so that you can kind of get a feel for, hey, 4 years ago when the supply and demand dynamics looked like this, these were the types of contracts that were out there. Maybe I can go in and negotiate something that looks more similar to what it did several years ago. And so the maintenance part is key on this because it needs to be kept up to date. But just because a contract is no longer being offered doesn't mean it will leave the library. It'll just be marked as inactive, which is very useful for charting historical trends.
Yeah, for sure. And so how would producers access the information?
Sure. So, of course, it has to pass both chambers of Congress. It have to go through a rulemaking process at USDA. But once that is done, we would anticipate that it would be warehoused at the Market News Division under the Agricultural Marketing Service. And assuming that they tee it up similar to other existing LMR tools, you could access that library on the Agricultural Marketing Service's website, similar to any other LMR reports.
Okay, great. And is this getting bipartisan support so far?
Absolutely. I mean, I think this is a unique issue in that, there are a lot of industry groups in the cattle space, and we don't always see eye to eye on all these issues. But this is one of those from a market transparency perspective that all of us can get behind and agree to as a tool that will be helpful for producers. And I think Congress has taken note of that, which is why you've seen such a broad bipartisan base of support in the House of Representatives. I think there were a total of 18 co-sponsors all in all of both parties. And it got marked up out of the House Agriculture Committee 48 hours after introduction on a voice vote. So they didn't even have to go and do a roll call. So I think that bodes really well for the type of support that this bill is enjoying. Look, the lead sponsor of the bill is Dusty Johnson from South Dakota. And he said it well. I think we would agree that this is not going to be a silver bullet solution, right? The adverse pricing environment that cattle producers have endured for several years is something that's going to require a whole multitude of policy solutions to address. We're going to need to focus on price discovery. We need to focus on expanding beef processing capacity. And we need to conclude that Justice Department investigation to see if there was anti-competitive behavior in the aftermath of some of these severe supply shocks that the market has endured. But this is one step in the right direction that the industry can widely support. And because of that, I think you're seeing such wide bipartisan support on the Hill.
Right. Yeah. Very good. Good points there. And so far, I think it's the only cattle producer group that hasn't endorsed the Cattle Market Transparency Act is RCAF USA. What they're saying is that it doesn't address the competition disrupting leverage that the beef packers now have. So how do you answer that if that's what some producers are thinking as well?
So the Cattle Contract Library Act it's separate from Cattle Market Transparency Act, which we also oppose the Cattle Market Transparency Act. But this Cattle Contract Library Act, we think that this is going to be a useful tool for producers from a transparency lens. Again, it's not the silver bullet, and it was never intended to be a silver bullet. It's meant to be part of a larger approach that does include processing capacity expansion, does include price discovery, and some of those other issues as well. And so any progress we can mark towards improving transparency, towards improving those other elements of this strategy is overall going to benefit producers. And at the end of the day, that's what we're here to do, is to try and increase every possible opportunity for our producers to be profitable. We've been doing that since we were established in 1898, and we're going to continue to do that today.
Very good. And so where is the bill right now?
So it was marked up out of the House Agriculture Committee. It awaits a vote by the full House of Representatives. Unclear whether that will happen by itself as part of the suspension calendar or whether that will be attached to a larger piece of legislation that's moving through the process. And then it will need to go to the Senate. Already have quite a bit of interest on the Senate side for folks who want to introduce companion legislation. And I'm hopeful that in the next couple of weeks, we can get a companion on the Senate side and start running it through the process over on the upper chamber.
Very good. And is there anything anyone can do to help? Who they should be writing to their local governments? What should they be doing?
Absolutely. I mean, I think on the House side, this is something that's pretty well moved through the process very quickly, I might add, which again, I think bodes to the amount of support that it enjoys across the industry. If producers think that this is something that is going to help them in their negotiations, then I would encourage them to reach out to their members of Congress, particularly in the United States Senate, where we're trying to find some folks to lead this legislation on that side of the Capitol. I think it's always helpful for them to hear from cattle producers on all sorts of issues, but when we're talking specifically about this one, it never does hurt to pick up the phone and voice your support.
Wonderful. And where can people find more information?
You can find more information by visiting us online at policy.ncba.org.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I always appreciate your insight into everything in the beef industry.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
And thanks to all who are watching or listening. If you want more information, the links are provided in the show notes. Don't forget to subscribe to our North American Ag Spotlight on YouTube and Rumble. And the podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And have a great day. Thanks so much for listening to today's Ag Spotlight episode, where we put the spotlight on people and companies doing great things for the agricultural industry. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Stitcher, or on your favorite podcasting platform, and give us a 5-star review. You can also follow us on YouTube and Rumble to see the video version of Ag Spotlight. Also, head on over to NorthAmericanAg.com to subscribe to our Industry Connect update newsletter. If you're interested in advertising opportunities, email us at connect at NorthAmericanAg.com. Thanks for listening.